Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. I guess it appears that China has blinked. Chief Executive Carrie Lam has said that she's going to withdraw this wildly unpopular extradition bill that's been sparking all of this turmoil in Hong Kong. She addressed a television audience on Wednesday and said this.
2 months, protests arising from the Fugitive Offenders Bill have continued. Our citizens, police and reporters have been injured during violent incidents.
Now, yes, there has been some violence, but it has not all been violence. There have been millions who have also marched on the streets of Hong Kong with no violence whatsoever. But yes, there have been times when they have blocked roadways, they have shut down the airport, and they've actually engaged in violence with the cops. So I don't want to downplay, I don't want to let her downplay or overemphasize, I should say, the violence that has taken place. Yes, there has been violence. But if you've watched the Hong Kong protests closely, the thing that has struck me more than anything else is the sheer numbers of people who have protested this law, demanding their freedom, but also the actual minimal violence that has taken place.
There have been chaotic scenes at the airport and empty outstations. Roads and tunnels have been suddenly blocked, causing delay and inconvenience to daily life. On June 15th, I announced that the bill was suspended and later reiterated that the bill is dead and that all the legislative work had come to a complete halt. The government will formally withdraw the bill in order to fully allay public concerns. The Secretary for Security will move a motion according to the rules of procedure when the Legislative Council resumes. After more than 2 months of social unrest, it is obvious to many that this contentment extends far beyond the bill. It covers political, economic, and social issues.
And the Chinese government, let's be honest, she is a puppet of Beijing. She can talk all she wants to about parliamentary and congressional procedures, and she can talk all she wants to about everything else, but it really boils down to President Xi and the Central Committee, the Central Communist Committee of the People's Communist Party in China, recognized that this was about to blow up in their face. And so rather than risk having to clamp down on the economic freedom that has made Hong Kong an economic dynamo in Western civilization, they decided to back down.
Including the oft-mentioned problems relating to housing and land supply, income distribution, social justice and mobility, and opportunities for our young people, as well as how the public could be fully engaged in government's decision-making. We can discuss all these issues in our new dialogue platform.
Now, the withdrawal of the bill satisfies only one of the 5 demands from the opposition movement, but it is a concession that seems aimed at weakening the overall popular support for the protest, though it's not really clear, in my opinion, if it's going to reduce the tensions that have gripped the city for more than 3 months. But let me emphasize what's really going on here. What I just said, I think, is probably the truest statement that anybody can make about why they did this. They are trying to weaken the popular support for the protests. So if the protests first started in opposition to this expansion of the extradition bill, the ability to take people in Hong Kong who have been charged with crimes and extradite them to mainland China for trial and obviously eventually detention, because, if you're charged with a crime and you're extradited to China, let's be honest, you're going to be guilty of those crimes and you're going to end up in a Chinese prison somewhere, never to be seen again. So by getting rid of that particular bill, the Chinese government, acting through Chief Executive Carrie Lam, has basically said that, we're going to eliminate that bill, And the purpose is trying to weaken popular support for the protests because their main objective right now is they don't want the military or the cops to have to clash. So let's do what they want with this piece. Try to get everybody else to settle down, everybody back to work, the airport's open, the transit system's working, all of those things going on. And then in the background, what we will do is we will try to find the perpetrators and handle them. But if we can just get the overall general population and the overall general popular support for the protests to go away, because now people will be able to say, look, you protested, we all marched, we all sang, we all carried American flags, we all sang the national anthem for the United States. We did all of these things, and you got what you were originally protesting. You see what that is designed to weaken popular support for the protests. So that if the protests continue, you've diminished the number of people that are protesting, which means that if you then have to clamp down on them, everybody else will. This is just the nature of human beings. Everybody else will say, well, we got what we wanted with that bill. We don't know what these goobers are doing now out there trying to continue to protest something else. So now the Chinese government will back off, the Hong Kong government will back off until they try to do something else. And the reason I say that is the protests grew into a broader opposition movement with additional demands. They wanted an inquiry into Hong Kong's police force's handling of the demonstrations. It expanded into greater calls for democracy. And all of that has pissed off Beijing. So that's why Beijing decided, well, if we can just get everybody to back off by getting rid of this one extradition bill, which is the genesis of the original protests, then we can undercut the popular support for these additional protests about greater calls for democracy, because that's the biggest threat to the Chinese government. So while this is good news, and I'm glad to be able to tell you about this news, I want to remind you that the Chinese government has an ulterior motive, and that is weaken support for the protests, weaken the support for the calls for greater democracy. And now I want to use that as a jumping off point to explain about revolutions. You can have a revolution that says we want greater democracy, but that's hard for people to get their head around. Okay, so we're protesting, but what specifically were you protesting? Well, we want more democracy. Okay, well, how do you want more democracy? If you can't give people a tangible thing to wrap their heads around, a tangible reason to go out and protest, you're not going to be able to get people to go out and protest. It's just how revolutions work. Now over time, all of these single grievances will grow into a gigantic grievance, and you may be able to get a revolution going that way. But China's not going to allow that to happen. China instead said, okay, well, they're now calling for greater democracy. They're calling for an inquiry into the Hong Kong Police Department. But let's just nip this in the bud over this one particular bill, the extradition bill. So they've done that. And so now people think to themselves, we've won. We've gotten exactly what we wanted. So now if a small group of protesters who still want to withdraw Hong Kong's subservience to China start protesting for greater democracy, that's too ephemeral. That's too nebulous. That's too broad. And so the protests will slowly dissipate and go away, and Beijing will figure out a way to backdoor another extradition bill, or maybe they'll just back off the extradition bill, and pretty soon we'll start finding that people charged with crimes in Hong Kong soon begin to disappear, and the cycle will begin again. But it's good news, but it's news that we need to understand exactly what's really going on. China's not backing off. They're backing off on one little piece in order to mollify the protest in general. Hang on, I'll be right back. I want to go to Africa for a minute and talk about the reason why Africa is so wretchedly poor. And it's because it has embraced big government. And when government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, eventually, whether it's done through, I'm going to use the word corruption, whether it's done through bribes or whether it's done through lobbying. Are you comparing bribes to lobbying? To a certain degree, I am. Although there may not be a direct exchange of cash in exchange for a vote on a particular matter, there is an exchange for a campaign contribution, maybe by a lobbying group or by a trade association or by a group of individuals who are part of an association, in exchange for that particular congressman or senator doing something that helps that particular group of people. I don't think there's anything wrong with lobbying. And I certainly don't, I'm not one of these that denigrates money in politics. I mean, hell's bells, you have to have money in politics. If you're going to run for office, you've got to be able to raise money. But in Africa, when government gets so big, it then becomes corrupt. Well, this unusually bright woman by the name of Majette Wade has an important insight into why Africa is so dysfunctional. She says that people complain about corruption as if corruption is the root problem. I say no, it is not. Corruption is also a natural consequence of stupid, senseless, idiot laws. And she goes on and talks to John Stossel.
People live in sub-Saharan Africa.
Why? Why is it that most of Africa stays poor while other parts of the world prosper? People have lots of theories.
Clean water is simply hard to find.
The present-day problems of the African continent are tied to its colonial history.
But I say Majette Wade's explanation makes the most sense. African governments simply have too many rules.
Once you hire someone, good luck getting rid of them for any reason.
Then there's taxes.
The tax code is so complicated, some people say it's worth at least 2 or 3 truckloads of paper.
Wade started this lip balm company in Senegal. Some ingredients she needs are not made there, so she imports them. But the government makes that expensive.
Some of them have a 70% import tariff on them.
So it almost doubles the price of things.
Exactly.
Many people then escape the tax by paying bribes. We hear about African corruption.
People complain about corruption as if corruption is a root problem. I say no, corruption is also a natural consequence of stupid, senseless, idiot laws.
There'd be just as much corruption in America if we had these rules?
Absolutely. The only way to fix corruption is to simplify.
Wade's business survived because she was fortunate to find a helpful bureaucrat.
I went to see the head of customs, and we started looking together.
He didn't demand a bribe.
We found a clause in one of the binders saying, actually, if you're exporting at least 80% of your products, and if you've been in business for 2 years, then you can ask for an exemption.
You survive through a loophole, but that takes connections and time to get each done. I imagine the leaders of these countries mostly mean well. They see how damaging this is. Why do they impose all these rules?
I am not so sure that all of them get it. Look at the
I'm not so sure that all of them. She goes on to talk about the United Nations and how the United Nations focuses not on economic freedom, but they focus on things like climate change and diversity and gender, recognition, all of that. And she's absolutely right. And the other thing that I thought was fascinating about this conversation that John Stossel, by the way, you can find this on Stossel TV on YouTube. The other thing that I found fascinating about the conversation was this. How many times have I said that every single one of us is a criminal? If any prosecutor, federal, state, or local, wants to dig long enough and take enough time, they can find somewhere, somehow, that you have violated either an actual statute making something a crime, or that you have violated a regulation that makes your actions or inactions a crime, or you have violated a policy somewhere that makes your action or inaction a crime. It's simply a matter of resources, time, and energy that a DA or a U.S. attorney wants to spend digging, trying to find something that you have done wrong. You know, in my Twitter feed, I subscribe to a Twitter account that is called Crime of the Day. And every single day, they tweet out some dumbass law that is a crime. And I know some of them are really stupid, like, you can't ride a horse after a certain amount of time, or park your, leave your horse at a certain place during a certain period of the day. I mean, there's stupid laws like that. But there are also laws that if you are, you're landscaping your backyard and you create a small garden with a pond, you may have just created a wetland that now subjects you to EPA regulations. And if you're not careful, by violating those EPA regulations, which include criminal, even without the mens rea, even without the requirement that you have an intent to violate the law or even a knowledge of the law, you can still end up being a criminal. And what this woman is pointing out is the danger that we have in this country. Because I guarantee you, whether you're an accountant or not, you don't know every aspect of the tax code. And I don't care whether you're an engineer or not. You don't know every aspect of the laws and the regulations about construction. And I don't care whether you're a biologist or a botanist or anything else. You don't understand or know all of the laws that may or may not affect individuals about environmental protection laws. It truly is so complex that if somebody wanted to go after you and make you a criminal, they can do it. And to this woman's point in Senegal, it is that government has become so big and so complicated that you either use corruption and bribes to try to make your business work, or you find one individual somewhere, you search and search and search, and you finally find one honest person who's willing to take the time, effort, and energy to help you find a loophole so that you can make your business a success. We're very close to that. We are very, very close to that. I have said it 1,000 times. I'll say it again. And this is a sincere challenge to all of you. Wherever you are, now, in some smaller towns, you may not be able to do this. But if you live in a major if you live in any metropolitan area, if there is a college, even a community college, it may or may not be true at a community college, but I would encourage you to at least go find out. Go to that library. I'm not sure a public library would have this, but I may be wrong. You go to any library on a community college, a state college, or even a private college campus, and I want you to ask the librarian, where's your government section? Where's the Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR? Where's the tax code? Where's the United States Code annotated, the federal laws? Where are Colorado state statutes annotated? Where are Texas or Oklahoma or Wyoming or any other state? Go look at those statutes. Go look at those regulations. And then think about what I said. Nobody knows everything that's in there. Even the bureaucrats who write them. I could find any single bureaucrat in any single department or agency, and I promise you they will not know every rule and regulation that agency or department has promulgated, because those bureaucrats are specialized. Oh, they know this section of the Code of Federal Regulations, or they know this section. They know whatever their program rules and regulations are, but they don't know about the other program rules and regulations. Well, if the bureaucrats who are writing these rules and regulations don't know anything except their little stovepipe of expertise, how can you as an individual know everything? You can't. And even lawyers. I don't care how smart the lawyer says they are. They don't know it all either. You know what makes them experts? They know how to go find it. And then they know how to interpret statutory or regulatory drafting and writing. That's what makes lawyers different. So just like this woman in Africa who is just trying to run a lip balm business, imagine this country, all of the hoops you have to go through. It is stupid what we are doing to ourselves. Hang on, I'll be right back. You know, I actually thought about talking about the fallout. This story hasn't really gotten much coverage. But I thought about talking about the fallout from the noxious actions of a Bloomberg reporter by the name of Ben Penn. Ben Penn managed to get a Labor Department official fired by smearing him as an anti-Semitic. And the guy is obviously anything but anti-Semitic. But then I thought to myself, you know, what am I going to say? The Bloomberg reporter has started to double down, actually boasting that he got the guy fired, which is good, according to Ben Penn. And you know why he thinks it's good? This is how, you know, I talk about how liberals shift. They'll start an argument out, and their original point is point A. And as a debater, you need to counter point A. So you make your counter argument against point A. And the liberals will say, well, regardless of point A, what about point B? So they're constantly shifting the debate. And this is exactly what this Bloomberg reporter has done. He first gets the Labor Department guy fired because he goes online and smears him as being anti-Semitic, which he is not. But then the Bloomberg reporter decides to double down, and now he's happy, and now he claims, because now he's shifting, well, I got the guy fired because that's good because his policies are bad. Let's go through the tweets. Ben Penn first tweeted, "Scoop," in all caps. Trump Labor Department's new senior advisor, Leif Olson, posted on Facebook that Jewish media, quote, protected their own, close quote. In response to my request to comment on Olson's anti-Semitic post, at USDOL, the United States Department of Labor, says they've accepted his resignation. And then he retweets, Ben Penn, the Bloomberg reporter does, he retweets his own tweet and says this: lost in all of this is that Olson, the guy that got fired, that resigned, was part of a team of political appointees tasked with the heavy lift of drafting wage hour regulations that are high priorities for the Trump White House and the business community. They're now down one advisor. The Trump administration has not admitted error. They've not offered the guy his job back. And of course, those who are diehard Trump fans, I'm a Trump supporter, but I'm not a fanatic. I support the president. I support most, if not all, of his policies. But the diehard Trump fans are, of course, excusing Trump for even allowing this to happen. Because, of course, you can't expect Donald Trump, who fights all the time, to do the right thing when there is a narrative out there. Nothing's changed. The media still sucks. And Trump, on the one hand, is a fighter. And then on the other hand, and I do not understand this, he backs off and just lets the guy resign. Now, there's always something. You know, Huey Long famously said there is always something. So maybe there is something in this guy's background that causes Trump to just say, okay, he's resigned. I'm not going to try to get him back. I didn't try to stop him. I didn't try to do any of that. By the way, the Department of Labor is headed up by Elaine Chao, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader's wife. She's one of these who comes in and out of Republican administrations all the time. Well, last night, I listened to a podcast from Russ Roberts in which he had a conversation with a listener by the name of Dave Deppner, who had written Roberts a question. I thought it was great. It reminded me of Robert Murphy's podcast in which where the host interviews someone not because they're famous, but because they wrote the host with a point of view that the host found interesting, and the host decided to have them on to talk about their point of view. The listener's question challenged the host on his campaign for people to be humble and to say, I don't know. Now, the reason I find this fascinating is I have always said that politicians should learn to say, I don't know. Don't ever make stuff up. Yesterday on the radio program, you heard me play a soundbite of a show in which you should have been able to recognize the voices, in which a caller called and asked why I was no longer on the air. And the host referred to me as a dodo bird and said, well, it had to do with ratings and advertising, sponsorships and endorsements. It had nothing to do with any of that. The proper answer should have been, I don't know. Now, because Russ Roberts is very well read and he's thoughtful, yet if you listen to his podcast, he constantly says the words, I don't know, and says that we should all emphasize the limitations of our own knowledge. Let's not pretend that we know the answers, because often we don't know the answers. Now, the listener pointed out that for people in positions of leadership, this approach doesn't work. And the bigger position of leadership you're in, the less it works to say, I don't know. So think about this. Imagine a Democrat on the presidential debate stage saying in response to a question, that's really a complicated problem, and we don't necessarily know how to fix it. But I'm going to try to understand all of the nuances of this problem, and I'm going to try to figure out what the proper solution is. But I don't want to stand up here tonight and say that I have the answer to this incredibly complicated issue. Can you imagine somebody doing that? They'd be toast faster than a really thin piece of toast in a nuclear toaster. We want leaders who are confident. And obviously, Donald Trump is supremely competent. But I think sometimes the president, for whatever reason, doesn't take the fight to the fight when he needs to. And I think this is one of those situations where he should, because it fits everything that he likes to troll the media about. Fake news. You call this guy an anti-Semite. He is not an anti-Semite. You really are attacking him because you don't like my policies about hour and wage programs. How about you just really report the news instead of trying to get somebody fired? I see this in blogs. I see this in radio programs. I see it everywhere. Readers gravitate. Listeners gravitate toward people who project confidence. Now, I like to project confidence, but you know what? I also like to project confidence when I don't know the answer. I like to say, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I need to go back. And you know why I'm confident in doing that? Maybe it's a matter of age and maturity. Maybe it's a matter of life experiences. But at some point, you have to learn to say, I don't know. And in fact, I've often said that in times of disasters, if government officials would respond to a question by saying, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to go to my staff as soon as this press conference is over with, and we're going to get the answer to your question, and we'll be back to you within an hour. Put a time limit on yourself. We don't know the answer. We don't know what's happened in this part of the disaster. We're going to find out, and we're going to get back, and we're going to tell you. I understand that all of us, I do. I gravitate toward people who are confident, who are self-assured, who have a point of view that I tend to agree with. It's just the way the world works. I know this. The Bloomberg reporter, Ben Penn, is a weasel. He's not a goober, he's a weasel. And for doing what he did to Leif Olson is despicable. But I'm also upset that the president didn't come to the defense of Leif Olson, particularly on the issue of anti-Semitism. Trump's been called a Nazi. He's been called a dictator. They've made the anti-Semitic comments about him. Donald Trump is not an anti-Semite. Donald Trump is a hugely great supporter of Israel, and I support the president for that, and I applaud the president for that. But in this case, I'm just here. I guess here's what my problem is. I'm sick and tired of people just walking away from fights. And I understand that sometimes, depending on how long you've been in the public arena, at some point you do say, I've done everything I can. And I respect that. I respect people who say, maybe not publicly, but they say to their friends and their family, their coworkers, I have fought the battle. I have done the best that I can. I've won some and I've lost some. And now I'm going on. And, you know, the proverbial line is, I'm going to spend more time with my family. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes that's a euphemism. But if somebody has served in the public arena and they've reached their limits, I have no problem with them walking away. And that may be exactly where Leif Olson was. He was just tired of it. Tired of being called an anti-Semite, tired of working on these issues, and so I'm gone. I can't argue with that. But what I do argue with is the idea that we put Leif Olson up, as Bloomberg has, as a trophy. We got somebody. So let's chop off their head, let's send it to the taxidermist, and let's put it up on our wall of fame. I hate the media for that. And I hate Bloomberg for what they've done to Leif Olson. Just learning to say, I don't know. I wish the president had said, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm going to look into it. And I wish he had called Elaine Chao and said, don't accept Leif Olson's resignation until you've briefed me about what's going on and what Bloomberg said, because it would have been a fantastic opportunity for the president to troll Ben Penn and Bloomberg, and done it on solid ground. How many times have you said, I don't know, but let me find out? We all need to learn to say, I don't know. I try not to talk about on the podcast the topics that I talk about on the radio program. But as I said yesterday on the radio program, there will be times when they overlap to some degree, and today is one of those days. Apparently, we're now at the point where when Walmart can respond to mass shootings and pass limited gun control faster than our government can. Let me say that again, because that's not me talking. That's somebody called Sassafras Lowry. You can look her up if you want to. She says when Walmart can respond to mass shootings and pass limited gun control faster than our government can, there's something wrong. Well, what's she saying? She's saying that Walmart's decision to not allow open carry in their businesses is somehow limited gun control, and they're doing much more than the government can and doing it faster than government can. Now, what's this all about? Well, Tuesday, the CEO of Walmart, Doug McMillon, announced in a company memo that Walmart's going to limit sales of guns and ammo in wake of the horrific shootings at his stores. The company is also going to discourage its customers from openly carrying guns in its stores. Walmart's apparently going to call on Congress to increase background checks. What? Increase background checks? The guy in Odessa was denied the purchase of a gun because he failed a background check. So he bought a gun from somebody else. Now, that somebody else could not have been a federal licensed firearm dealer, because that FFL would have been required in order to keep his certification and his permits and his licenses. He would have been required to conduct a background check before he could have sold the Odessa shooter a gun. Which leads me to the conclusion, what? Oh, the Odessa shooter must have gotten his gun illegally. He either bought it from a non-licensed dealer, or he bought the gun from a thug, or he stole the gun. What are increased background checks going to do? how are you going to enforce increased background checks or comprehensive background checks? Because if I decide to sell, well, I've actually engaged in this 2 or 3 times. I have a friend who sold me one of his guns. I either wrote him a check or gave him cash, and he gave me the gun. I have bought a gun from a man. Didn't know the man. He happened to listen to the radio program. That's validation enough for me. So we met in a parking lot. I bought his gun. I gave him a bill of sale, kept a copy for myself, listed the serial number, did not conduct a background check. And you know what? If Congress passes a law that says that if my friend and I have to get a background check for he and I to buy and sell, trade guns, screw them. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. It's inconvenient, and I'm the law-abiding gun owner. I am not the lawbreaker. Well, Michael, if we require you to sell the gun to your friend and to get a background check, and you say you're not going to do it, now you're a lawbreaker too. Yeah, I am. But I'm not out killing people. I'm not out randomly shooting people. Well, now Kroger, oh, by the way, before I leave Walmart has 5,000 stores. I think it's 5,000. They have 5,000 stores or 5,000 plus stores in the United States. They've had a shooting at 2 of those stores. You do the math. I think it's like 0.004% or something. Oh, but we've got to do something. And now Kroger, which owns King Soopers, the grocery chain here in Colorado, they've joined Walmart in asking shoppers not to openly carry guns in stores. Jane Costin over at CNBC offers a note. Neither Walmart nor Kroger have forbidden gun owners from bringing concealed weapons into stores. The gun ban is on open carry. Permissive open carry is legal in 26 states. Somebody's going to challenge this, as they well should. But Michael, it's a private business. They ought to be able to do what they want to do. Okay, that's a deal. If you want me to buy that argument, then Jack can decide who he wants to bake a cake for, right? Why do we keep wanting to have it both ways? Virtue signaling. That's all this is, virtue signaling. And I think it's wrong. But mark my words, this is how progressives work. They're not attacking the Second Amendment. They're attacking law-abiding gun owners. I intend to fight back. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. You know the drill. By the way, before you don't go away, do not go away. The radio program is called Michael Brown's Heck of a Show. If you would also like to download the podcast for that, we have now submitted it to iTunes and to the iHeart app. So if you'll just, I checked this morning, it hasn't gone through yet, but it should go through at any moment. But I would ask you to and by the way, you can also get it on Spreaker. So if you want to go ahead and start listening to the radio podcast on Spreaker, you can do that. But I would certainly appreciate it if you would subscribe to it on iHeart and iTunes. And again, if you can leave a 5-star rating and write a short 2-sentence review about why you like this podcast and the radio podcast, that'd be great. So now you're going to be able to get 3 hours, or the essence of 3 hours, of Michael Brown every day. You get Michael Brown Unplugged, which is what this podcast is, and you get Michael Brown's Heck of a Show, which is what the radio program is. And as I said before, I'm going to try to make sure that they don't intertwine too much, but there will be days that are topics that are just near and dear to my heart, like Walmart, and King Soopers, and not allowing open carrying in their stores. But hey, if you want to conceal carry because, well, you know what? Yeah, continue to listen to both podcasts and subscribe to both. So you know the drill. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Leave a 5-star rating. Leave a short 2-sentence review if you can. That would be greatly appreciated. It really helps on the iTunes if you do that. Subscribe to us on iHeart. Share it. And then if you want to follow me on social media, you know the drill. You can find all of that at michaelbrowntoday.com. We put the podcasts up on YouTube. We put them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They're going to start going everywhere. And I'd like for you to join the discussion group on the Facebook page. But you have to like the Facebook page, facebook.com/Michael D. Brown. Facebook.com/Michael D. Brown. And then you can ask to join the discussion group of Michael Brown Unplugged. And many of you have done that. I got to get online today and see if there's any new requests to join. So be sure and do that, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.